Hi, and welcome to another episode of No Limit with Krzysztof and Luke, a 7 Investing production. Today is Monday, the 21st of November, and as ever, I'm delighted to be joined by my 7 Investing lead advisor and good buddy, Krzysztof Pakarski. How you doing?
Hey, happy Monday to you, Luke. You guys still have a prime minister?
We do. It's political stability here. Everything is fantastic. Although actually there's some instability in my little home office recording studio. I can see the walls peeling away as I speak. I noticed a recent podcast I recorded with Simon and Anirban. I was super echoey. So you know what I've done is I bought from Amazon these cheap, like, funky... I'm going to pull one off the wall because it's literally falling off. Hang on. I bought a ton of these.
Oh, wow, that's serious.
I've lined my wall with these, and I came into the office this morning and like half of them are on the floor. For anyone who's only on the audio, they're like these funky triangular kind of foam acoustic panels, but I shouldn't have gone so cheap.
That's how you know we're serious.
Hopefully I'm not echoing now anyway.
Yeah. Man, so since we last talked, those of us in the US have had an election, and it turned out quite differently than predicted, so that's always a fascinating thing. And rumor has it a majority of that is because people were distancing themselves from Trump, while just the other day Twitter welcomed him back. Yeah, a
new horse has re-entered the race. What's your... I know we're going to talk about Twitter a lot on today's episode, but what's your view on Trump re-entering the political arena in the States?
I think he's problematic, to say the least.
Probably for the Republicans more so than the Democrats, right? He's going to completely split their vote.
Yeah, the elections told us that people no longer want that level of narcissism, and so his candidates, the ones he backed, were rejected. So it seems like we have some semblance of I don't want to overstate the case, but stability, and Trump clearly represents a move back toward chaos, and we seem to be done with that. So if the Republican Party chooses him, like you said, it's probably going to be chaos for them and pretty much ensure more Democratic candidates. Interestingly, too, this morning I read the former Attorney General Barr outwardly condemned Trump essentially as highly problematic and not good for the country.
Are they still pursuing some sort of conviction against him?
Oh yeah, he has all kinds of cases in court. But I imagine that's going to be years or months and years before that plays out. But it's interesting. He still has a base, but the people who now see their political fortunes in danger are clearly distancing themselves from him.
Yeah, well, I kind of see this as a bit of a victory for common sense in terms of how maybe the voters have reacted to him kind of coming back into the fray. So probably it's positive for the future. But the Democrats have got to field a better candidate than Biden come 2024.
Yeah. In full disclosure, I really detest him as a person, as a character, say. Right. But I try to see things from all the sides, and the people in his corner, said he was the kind of force that questions everything, including all of the rot and including all of the assumptions that needed to be questioned. So from that angle, he served, I think, a really important role. But at some point, from my perspective, again, you have to draw a line. And when your own government, when you're inciting riots that lead to death with no accountability, it's, an agent of chaos that is so virulent is not, it's just not how civilization works anymore, hopefully.
Well, that's civilization. Let's turn to social media side of things. How's that functioning? So Trump's back on Twitter. I saw a bit of a disingenuous poll by Elon Musk, right, to say, should we bring Trump back? I saw someone that described some kind of crazy rationale to that, like, more maybe retrofitted Elon four-dimensional chess, that Twitter poll was maybe a bot trap to try to identify all of the fake accounts.
That's interesting. I actually took that to be the higher truth.
Maybe.
My assumption was that he knew he was bringing back Trump.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that was it. I mean, how many millions of votes did that get? Or views? I think 14 something million votes, right?
Yeah.
But 100 something million views.
Right.
And I'm guessing the engineers must have caught a massive amount of bots. So I believed him.
I'm not sure I believe that's why they did it, but perhaps subsequently they've realized there might be some interesting insights there. I mean, I think a bit like kind of a lot of his actions, he's kind of justifying the thing he knows he's going to do anyway, with, ascribing it to the, kind of the will of the people.
Yeah. So Luke, tell me, right now it seems like my own Twitter feed seems highly polarized. You've got the Elon is a nut job, and the other side, this is what excellence in execution looks like. What's your take?
I guess I'm seeing the same sort of stuff. I'm almost to the point where I want to kind of mute Elon or anything referencing Elon, because it's getting a bit dominant. I'd like to just think about some other stuff. But maybe an interesting angle on that question is like how he's managed the company Twitter since taking it over. And there's definitely like two polar sides to kind of how that's playing out. One aspect is he's taken an axe to the organization in a very smart way, and he's going to, keep the people he needs to run a tighter ship and much more operationally effective. The other side is he's just willfully ignorant of employment laws, perhaps outside of the US, and he's fired all of the teams that keep the company operating. Did you see a hilarious tweet today, actually, about some guy? So Twitter has something called being super followed. Did you see this one?
Mm-mm.
It's ridiculous. So I believe it. Some guy. So apparently you can. I've never seen this, but apparently you can super follow someone, which means you kind of pay to be a follower, and you subscribe. I don't know how it works, but I guess the main account sets like a price, and then to be a super follower, I might pay like $2 a month to be a 7 flying platypus, which is you, Krzysztof, a 7 flying platypus follower. So this guy tweeted, "Hey, Twitter, the company seems to be a super follower of mine, and I think they've probably fired all of the people who look after like invoicing and account management." So he jacked his own super follow rate up to $10,000, and apparently he got paid.
Wow. Oh, that's fascinating. Right. That's awesome. A good business model. Can we invest in that? Like, what's the stock ticker for that, Luke? Where's the IPO? Yeah. Anirban, one of our co-lead advisors, is quite bullish on Tesla, as am I. And I think in our own conversations, he said something that I really agreed with. Forget call it character eccentricities. Yep. This is a man who is running a rocket ship company that is perhaps exceeding the capacities of NASA, or at least like they're on a peer-to-peer level, right? So actual rocket science. And he completely revolutionized the automotive industry, one of the hardest things to do possibly, right? Any industry, with operational margins that are truly out of this world. So the thought that this guy can't handle a website platform while also, he himself having coding experience and coding understanding, and at his disposal, some of the world's best engineers. This kind of like my take was that the overreaction to how bad he's doing and that it's all going to crumble felt to me like yelling fire in the theater, and I was incredibly bullish after that. Like, in the sense of like, wow, Twitter's going to be better. Like, I don't know if it's my own Elon Kool-Aid, or the pieces don't. The pieces do not add up for him failing at this.
Okay, I kind of agree longer term, but he's going to do, as he self-admitted, he's going to do a bunch of dumb stuff along the journey, because he's just going to try stuff, and what doesn't stick, they're going to abandon. But they've clearly mismanaged some key elements of this, like the rollout of Twitter Blue, which was the kind of, pay $8 to get a subscription tick. They rolled it out on iPhone, and then they had to pull it like a week later when various big advertisers were being impersonated to the detriment of the advertiser's brand. Like, who knows what goes on inside the mind of this man? I wouldn't even pretend to understand or guess. But if he approaches this as a pure technology or business problem, there's another whole angle around where they get their revenue today, which is, 90% of their revenue, I think, comes from advertisers. And Elon recognizes they have to break that dependence. But if he totally disenfranchises the advertisers on the journey of getting to the point that they have like sustainable subscription revenue, well, it's going to cost him a lot of money. Am I right to say the burn rate is like $1 billion a year, something like that? He's got the pockets, so he can afford it. He could turn it into something really interesting, but he could also break it along the way, perhaps. And that doesn't mean breaking the technology, but he could just break the community. Like, people would just leave because it becomes like an unholy place to hang out.
Do we know how many people are on Twitter?
I seem to remember a monthly active user number, which is in like a couple of 100 million, but that's like way lower than Facebook's and some of the other networks.
Right, I was assuming it was like something like 500 million people, and you're kind of iterating, and he's trying to iterate in public, which break things, fix them quickly, break them quickly, fix them quickly. It just seems like, given that there is, well, I guess massive, it's all relative, but when you have a massive number of people, not the whole world, but still a huge number of people, and all of a sudden you lose, 7,500 employees, right? Was that the that the number, right?
Yeah, that sounds right, yep.
And it turns out you only need 50 or 100 of them, so that bloat, right? And this is, I think, the main point here. It's a genuine question for me. What were those 7,400 people doing on a daily basis? I mean, that's the knock, right? Like, I know lots of things need to get done, but to go from 7,400 to it still being functional enough at 100, that's a massive difference.
There's an assumption there that it remains functional, right? So you wouldn't feel the impact of losing, I don't know, the guys who do the payroll or half your finance department, right? There's some core operational roles that are nothing to do with Twitter, the technology. I don't know the extent to which he's kind of culled folk in those departments, but you wouldn't feel the impact of that until you had to do your next kind of quarterly report, or you had to actually make payroll or something. So I think I think he's going to suffer some issues in the short to medium term. I don't doubt the guy's ability to hold the thing together until they sort it all out.
So it remains to be seen, right? But the clear message here that's worth thinking about is, if he's successful, then to go from 7,500 to say 100 tells the rest of the big tech world, including all the stock-based compensation stuff, like, this was a joke to some extent. What we were doing before was a joke. Shareholders were being sacrificed at the altar, and for what? For no good reason. So it seems seismic, right? It seems like this is a kind of seismic moment in where we are with macro, where we are with growth rates, and what Elon is trying to pull off. Like, it will be a revolutionary kind of shift, right?
I agree. Maybe bringing it back to that comment I just made about all these kind of operational teams. Like, I saw a Twitter thread maybe a week ago that talked about a potential implosion in SaaS. Maybe the SaaS bubble popping. Because these companies are on such a high burn rate. They have so many different services they're paying tens of $1,000s a month for, subscribing to kind of run bits of their organization. Well, actually, though, if they can take the Twitter lesson, if they can like slash and burn their permanent workforce, get their costs way, way down, that's fantastic for shareholders. It's fantastic for stock-based comp. And you can still buy in a lot of these operational capabilities. So, maybe it's things like this that, continue the SaaS kind of business model for the next decade.
Man, what a time to be alive. Do you have a more like a personal, emotional, human stake here, or is it pure business analysis kind of thinking?
On Twitter specifically?
Yeah.
I am rooting for the platform to succeed and Musk to succeed, and for him to turn it into like a stronger, better platform with less bots and crap. because it's the only social network I take seriously. Like proper quality conversation happens there. I think I said to you the other week I installed TikTok, so I've still been swiping on TikTok, right, in some downtime here and there. Every other advert on TikTok right now is a crypto scam. I haven't dug into it, but they're trying to say, you can arbitrage your Bitcoin by buying it here and selling it here. Bullshit, guys. There's a lot of... Hang on, my cat's going crazy. I'll say hello, Sushi. I fed him before the podcast. And he still wants more. Get out of here.
Oh, man,
if you hear him squeaking, he's like shouting at me down there. Coming back to Twitter, right? So that stuff happens on Twitter as well. If Elon can fix that, it's going to be a better network. And I get a lot of personal utility out of my use of Twitter. It's like the only place I go to get news, pretty much.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. The amount that I've learned via that platform, it seems to me it's the only place you have legitimately serious people offering legitimate value to others.
Right.
I have a deep bias against Meta for all kinds of reasons not worth talking about right now, so I completely left that place. Instagram, I basically took Cal Newport's warnings about the harms of social media seriously, and so I got off of basically all social media, and then education is via Twitter. Take that away, and I think it would feel like a big gap in my resources. So I really hope he succeeds.
Did you, out of interest, check out Mastodon, which is being touted as a potential Twitter replacement?
No, I have not.
I did. It's clunky. It's slow. It's clunky. It took me too long to sign up. I kind of gave up in the end. But I don't know where people go. I see a bunch of finfluencers I respect moving to Instagram. If Instagram can be turned into like a place where more serious discussion happens, that's great, I suppose. But yeah, I'm still hoping Twitter is the place to hang, the town square.
I want to over exaggerate a point because maybe it'll provide some folks listen to this some context. I really, as someone who is fascinated by the likes of Leonardo da Vinci and someone like Einstein, I think it's extraordinarily rare when you have a clear, genius is an overused term, but someone operating on using metrics and a way of thinking that is so far above, and not above, that's also hierarchical, but so other than where most people operate. And for him to have all the resources that he needs and to be willing to do everything in public and a kind of like prankster to boot makes the whole show one of the, it's like the most entertaining thing we got. Like there's no television series I'd rather watch than how this is unfolding live in real time, like on your computer screen. It's so fascinating. So,
if you're not on Twitter and you're kind of wondering what all the drama's about, like go check it out, and while you're there, maybe go follow Krzysztof and myself.
That's right. That's the first step. God, we're two old fuddy-duddies compared to all of the things that... Anyway, so Luke, you had a mission. You're on a mission. You took my what's the polite way to phrase this? My encouraging words to have a look at a portfolio category labeled as worry stocks.
Yeah, I did. I've done pretty well, actually. Hopefully you'll be pleased with my progress. So when we last met, you told me off quite correctly for having this fairly chunky worry stock category in my own personal investment portfolio. I haven't got the numbers at hand. I think I had something like 10 stocks categorized as worries, and it was like 5.1% of the portfolio. So I've been through like maybe half of those. So I think I'm now down to 6 worry stocks, which represent 2.5% of the portfolio. That's pretty good. I've kind of halved the challenge, and I did that by basically selling 3 things that I've kind of given up the ghost on. So I sold Fiverr, the two-sided marketplace. I sold a little company called Curiosity Stream, and I sold Anapsys Bio. I sold that last one just because damn, like I can't even remember what these guys do now. I'm so not close to the business model. If I don't understand it, I just do not have the bandwidth to get back into it. And then I had a fairly chunky one, Block, was known as Square. That was on my worry list. I've kind of upgraded that back to my growth list. I think I've kind of reinstilled my belief in their model.
So one thing that maybe some investors who might be in the beginning stages or even in the middle stages, or never mind, maybe for everyone, what was the feeling you had after you sold them? Like once you pushed the button and then they were out of your portfolio, what did you experience?
I suppose a bit of relief that like I've got a better handle on what I own, for one. It's been on my to-do list for some time, like go understand these companies and fix them. So that little jolt of serotonin, whatever the brain hormone is, that when you've done something that rewards you. Like I've now got something off my to-do list, and I'm a guy who lives his life by lists.
Yeah, I find it's that kind of task is maybe one of the most difficult things to do, to execute. But when executed, it's that one decision that takes care of 100 more, and somehow I feel more clean anytime I complete the process. One, identify something that concerns me. Two, take a deliberate stance toward, okay, I'm going to figure this out. I'm keeping this, or I want to, actually, it's more about going back to why do I have this company? Checking out the biases, all the anchoring fallacies, all of the stuff, right? And then making a decision. Okay, I'm no longer worried about it because of this and this reason. I understand the thesis and I'm going, it's clear or it's out. And that feeling of relief, it's maybe it feels well earned in these situations.
I know you've had a significant removal from your own portfolio lately, so I guess you're speaking from the heart there a little bit.
Yeah, and it's so hard. It's so just not to sugarcoat this, especially when you're looking at heavy losses. And often with these companies, it's not like all the potential is all of a sudden out the window. Like for most of them, the potential is still great, and now you're thinking to yourself, and it's 80% cheaper. So to make that executive call is incredibly hard. And I think maybe a saving grace for me, maybe the thing I overlook most of the time, is the thought I could always buy it back once it merits inclusion in my portfolio.
I get that. I've come at it a slightly different way, because there's a term I kind of picked up being a change guy in a bank for a long time. And sometimes, like, you don't have enough information to make a decision, but you have to make a decision and you have to kind of move forwards. So the term I would use when I'm running like a steering committee or something and trying to get a decision was like, we're going to take this as a no regrets decision. We understand the fact that we don't have we have imperfect information to make the best decision we can today, and we're not going to regret that, no matter what, because we took the best decision we could take. So I've kind of applying that framework to those smaller decisions around my own portfolio. Like I'm a bit very unlike yourself. Like I haven't held on to like one share. I'm probably, I've exited these companies. I'm not going to follow them anymore. I've got, bigger fish to fry. And if they go on to be 100 baggers from here, well, great for the team and the founders. I kind of took my no regrets decision. So I guess I'm going to have to try and not regret that.
Oh, that's a great counterpoint, I think, to what I was saying. Yeah, often I'll leave the one share just to keep it, because there's a difference for me when the stock is on the watch list versus it's still literally my portfolio, even though I don't count the one share holdings as holdings. I don't know if that's like a sleight of hand kind of thing, but it helps me, either see, it keeps me, I think usually it's because I understand those companies well. They stay more visible to me when I have the one share, and it's maybe not so much about regret, even though that framework you talk about is really strong. But it maybe makes it easier for me to follow the story and then go back in if the evidence warrants it.
Yeah, but I see that, and it's the way your approach is powerful. But the downside is, like, it's always just consuming a little bit of your emotional bandwidth. And if you do see, I missed out on this huge gain, right? That's very clear in your mind, like it's there on your scorecard.
Yeah, good point, Luke. hopefully, yeah, for people listening to this would be an interesting place for anyone to offer some commentary should you be, I guess, watching this on YouTube, because it feels to me like we're offering two useful strategies that are different from one another. And maybe it's the case there, like one of those know yourself kind of things where, right? Where for Luke, the no regret strategy just makes the Band-Aid ripping it off that much more, leaves him at ease. And for me, it kind of, there's a strategic element that I play with.
That's the hardest thing about managing a portfolio, right? It's actually not managing the portfolio, it's managing yourself. And I think your comment there, know thyself, as the Oracle said to Neo, right? That's the most important thing. If you can manage your portfolio in a way that plays to the things that either you're strong at or you're comfortable with, you have a much more higher chance of success.
Right, and then sticking to that strategy, especially when things get tough. That kind of thing is what experience gives you over the years, and it's always humbling when you realize so many years in, right? And I've made this fairly rookie mistake again, yeah. Right? But then acknowledge it and make the needed move and onwards, right?
That's an interesting segue to another conversation I know we wanted to have today. And it was about a comment you picked up on a recent episode of the All In podcast. Do you want to pick us up on that?
Yeah, forgive me if I don't remember who said it exactly and the full context, but I thought I heard one of the gents over there say there needs to be a test in order to participate in the markets. And I think they were specifically talking about crypto. In the context of crypto, right? That we have all these scams taking place, and that's in part because people, to a large extent, do not know what they're doing on a very basic level. So I think that comment was meant to be provocative, but whoever said it was quite passionate. They're saying it's basically idiotic for us to allow people to engage in complex, risky markets, say, without any way of knowing their qualifications to step into this arena. So just like we have a test for driving, why do we not have a test for market participation? And I thought about that, and it kind of it resonated so much to me with 7 Investing's mission. First of all, like, we provide an immense amount of research for you, but the idea in a larger sense is we're empowering you, right, to know what you're doing, right? Which it's kind of like a university of sorts. There's no official test, but is that really a bad idea? Like, would not our culture in general be better served if there was in fact some sort of certificate you needed in order to buy securities?
So I think there's 2 aspects to this. And I think the conversation the guys had on the All In pod was like your point, but there's an additional point as well. So it was certainly about crypto and the view that, to engage in some of these risky things that we can do today, you should probably have a bit of education, enablement, and maybe certification to protect you. But at the same time, I think in the US, there are certain investments that a regular retail investor cannot get access to. Venture capital stakes, crowdfunding, things like that. And at the same time, introducing some education and a test to allow people to do something they can't do today could also be valuable. But if we stick with your first point about should we introduce a qualification to allow you to be an investor, say, I think that's kind of the point you were taking at. So I kind of get it, but at the same time, I'm a bit resistant to that because already not enough people are investors. And let's put aside, growth investing and managing an active portfolio. If we just say you've got 10% of your salary going into some sort of pension or your savings account for the future, and it's investing in like passive index trackers, it's investing in the S&P or the FTSE or whatever it might be. Should we establish more barriers to that? Like, we want everybody to do that, surely, take charge of their financial future.
Yeah, that's a good point, Luke. I wonder if the analogy of driving is useful. On the one hand, it allows us immense freedom. We also acknowledge that kills, let's say, 40,000 people a year, right? So everyone knows that there are inherent dangers to this thing, and yet we obviously support We're at least in the United States. Forgive me for being U.S. centric, but I guess in the modern Western world, right, driving is kind of a linchpin to how we do things. The fact that it's so central to people's lives, but we also need to make sure you at least can pretend to drive the car and park it and can read the basic signs. It doesn't get rid of the dangers, but it does, I don't know, what does it do? I mean, is this maybe a point in your case? Like, it standardizes what we think everyone knows on a road, and I'm assuming some classes actually teach you something worthwhile. So maybe I'm stuck
here's a way into it, because I think it's something that all societies should do, which they don't today, which is like some basic level of investing awareness, understanding compound interest, things like that. But at a kind of school level, when you say, well, actually from even kind of preschool, you could start to do that with like Legos and building blocks and stuff and bartering. But, right through the curriculum, I think there should be like an applied track to maths, which just talks about personal finance and, the dangers of credit cards and buy now, pay later. That's the kind of stuff that's going to protect people. At the same time, I think everyone should, learn the basics of first aid. Like, there are sort of basic things that don't take much and that could be incredibly beneficial for the individual and for society. But should you have to get some sort of license to be an investor? Like, I think we should be making it as easy as possible, not more difficult.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's a good point. It's kind of like we're trying to do two separate things, and it's like like encouraging people to complete something like maybe in the future 7 Investing offers an investing certificate, and it's very obvious that if you take months worth of classes with the 7 investing advisors, you're going to be leagues ahead of where most people are, and you're probably going to save yourself from doing something incredibly stupid
on a voluntary basis. Absolutely. Like having wider availability of that sort of stuff, and the stuff we do at 7 Investing actually is relatively complex. We're sort of tailoring our subscription product to a more sophisticated investor who really wants to manage their own investments. But even having like the basics, making that stuff more widely available, some government funding. So at least like I recently enabled the ability to trade options in one of my accounts. I had like a ton of risk approvals I had to tick off. And eventually, even I'm bored of reading like the details and all the terms and conditions. I'm just clicking like accept. We need something a bit more engaging than that. But yeah, making that stuff more widely available to a regular investor can only be a good thing.
Right, and I guess even then it only goes so far. If we want to talk about the FTX meltdown, right? Talk about insanity. But one of the wildest things from my perspective is how many supposedly professional investing houses did not do what I guess in hindsight looks like basic diligence.
Yeah.
I mean, I really don't know the details, Luke, but Chamath actually on the All In podcast, he said it clearly, right? Like he said, we did our research and we need you to follow up with X, Y, and Z. And the response was, go F yourself.
Probably there's like a million better informed sources than you and I to get into the details of what went wrong with FTX. But clearly a bunch of folk failed their due diligence. But the people I feel sorry for are mum and pop investors who maybe had their cryptocurrency on this centralized exchange, assuming it was safe. But this is like the Wild West still, right? It's unregulated. There's no insurance to protect your funds on those platforms. It's not segregated money. You've got no way of evidencing that they have the reserves that they say they have so they can pay you out if there's a kind of run on the bank. Unfortunately, it ties into that conversation we were just having about, having a better understanding of what it is you're doing. If you're in the world of cryptocurrency, like many of the protections you have compared to your regular bank account, they just do not exist, and it'll be a long time before that market matures to the point that they do.
Yeah, and in another note of genuine condolence to anyone that really lost anything, really. What a terrible outcome. The only silver lining I could think of is, like a good forest fire, the ground becomes more fertile for the authentic players. We have to go through the scam phase, right? Like, it's just how I guess it always works, right? You that's the only way humans learn to weed out the greed and corruption and grift. And my genuine hope and suspicion is that the crypto industry, because the technology is so fundamentally powerful, will become better, stronger, and more civically minded in the future. And that's a good thing. It's just a great sorrow that came at such a high cost.
We probably haven't seen the full cost just yet, right? There seems to be a lot of collateral damage from FTX's meltdown. So we're likely to see a number of other big institutions go down at the same time. Really, I took the view, I've got a tiny bit of cryptocurrency, not a huge amount at all, like less than 1% of my portfolio. But I took the view, if I'm going to have this sort of investment, I don't want to put it on a centralized exchange. I'm going to do self-custody. So I've got like a hardware wallet, and I've taken certain steps to preserve my passphrase, my key, and I'm confident it's all secure. It's not worth trying to hack me and go after me. There's not enough there, guys. Don't bother. But I'm pretty confident in my protocols. But it is complex to do that stuff, right? And, if you don't want to write down your passphrase somewhere, some people like have it stamped into a block of aluminium and bury it in the garden or something. I haven't done that. Don't come and dig up my garden. If you haven't protected your key, then if you lose your key, you've lost your coins. So, there are downsides to that as well. You have to trust yourself not to do something stupid, as opposed to trusting the exchange not to do something stupid and lose your currency on your behalf. So, it's just a difficult place to be a retail investor, I suppose.
Yeah, you raise a good question. When you're a complete beginner, I would agree with you that maybe it's a high learning curve. I've been trying to figure out this crypto world now I've had my hands dirty in it for about 2 very active years. So I've went through that painful phase of nothing quite working and like links leading to dead ends and all that stuff. But now I maybe hold a little bit of a difference of opinion with regard to, say, the difficulty of going into a hard wallet. The company I use, the Ledger Nano, they you plug it in and the directions are written in a humane way, easy to understand way. And if you could read what the directions tell you, I thought the process was actually more simple and more accessible, certainly way more user friendly than all the other Wild West crypto stuff. And I've now coached a good number of people to do exactly that, and no real issues. You just have to be careful, right? Like, pay attention, follow the steps, and keep your password like in a place that's safe. But to me, that doesn't feel that much different than like, where do you store your passport? Where do you're not going to just, if you could hold on to your passport, right, in some drawer or some safe or some place in your house, you could jolly well put in the words you wrote down to protect your crypto, and it doesn't feel that much different.
Well, this could be fun, but like here's 2 things to think about then that maybe you've addressed this already. So, okay, if you have literally got your 24-word phrase written down somewhere in the house, right? There's a risk there, and criminals are becoming more sophisticated. So if they see something that looks like that, even if you've tried to encode it in some way, someone might figure out that that's what it is, and then it's very simple. Cost them $50 to buy their own ledger. Basically seize your private keys using that passphrase and drain your accounts. If you haven't written it down and it's not straightforward, what are you going to do when you die? And how is someone going to inherit that cryptocurrency from you?
Wait, I thought you were asking me I thought I'm the one doing the 3 questions this week.
I came up with a cunning solution to this that I'm not going to discuss, but I did come up with a way to solve this problem, which I can't discuss, but I'll happily share with you privately.
All right, yeah. Yeah, okay, right. Before we give away too much information to the scammers in our audience. Yeah.
Before we come off this topic, though, like I saw a really good article on The Street just a few days ago, and it was a chap just on the street who's written a piece on the increase in scams as a result of this kind of FTX meltdown. And there's some, I won't go into too much detail because I know we're running a bit long on this episode, but there's some, nasty stuff happening. And I think just as a warning to anyone who's listening, right, protect your cryptocurrency. If someone calls purporting to be from Binance or CoinDesk and they say, they're trying to get you to give us certain information to secure your account, it's probably a scam, right? You just need to have your bullshit detector on max mode right now, in particular, all the time, but especially right now, because crypto scammers are going crazy. Again, probably haven't got time to do justice to the topic, but there's some really nasty stuff called pig butchering, which is, as it seems to have sort of taken hold as a sort of center of this stuff actually in Cambodia, where I was quite recently. But whole teams, incredibly well-funded teams of folk who are basically executing scams on innocent folk overseas with things like romance scams. And you would be shocked. I've read some case studies. You'd be shocked at the amount of time and effort and resources that go into executing some of these scams. But when they pull them off, they're taking people for literally millions of dollars. One poor lady I listened to an interview with lost $6 million to one of these romance scams, and it kind of wiped her out when she was in retirement. It's really not a pretty picture. There's actually another level of hell to this whole thing, unfortunately. I used to kind of bait these folk when they got in my Twitter DMs and, lead them on a little bit, just because I think if I'm wasting their time, they're not pestering somebody else. And I was kind of thinking, oh, look how clever I am for doing this. Actually, the next level of hell I hadn't appreciated is, unfortunately, there are people from all across Southeast Asia being trafficked into Cambodia with the offer of like a job offer, and then they're basically in human slavery, and they're being forced to execute these scams. So unfortunately, the poor person you're chatting to is probably in a much worse situation than you. But, number one, look after yourself.
Wow, that's terrifying. Yeah.
Should we give a quick plug to The Street? So we do some work with The Street at 7 Investing. The Street is a fantastic resource for kind of financial news, financial education, articles like that crypto scam one I just mentioned. We've got a fairly close link with The Street ourselves. One of our ex-lead advisors and still a very good friend of the 7 Investing family, Dan Klein, he's their managing editor. Dan's got a great history with many finance websites, deep knowledge, and it's a really good news source. I said earlier, Twitter's my number one news source. That's true, but I go read a lot of stuff on The Street too. So I would recommend checking it out at thestreet.com if you're not familiar with it.
Fantastic. Yeah, and you'll be seeing more content from the 7 advisors linked to The Street. So great way to get your finance education up to par.
So what else should we tackle today, buddy? What's on our list?
I'll quickly mention more of my reading journeys. I'm getting close to finishing Chip War, which I still maintain this is one of the most thrilling, enjoyable reads in recent days, just as a standalone. Forget investing, but the things I've learned in here are kind of blowing my mind. And I'm not even at the good parts yet. I'm not even at the, in the contemporary modern era yet. So highly recommend that. And I just finished a work of fiction called When We Cease to Understand the World by Benjamin Labatut, I believe is his name. A truly stunning work of art and imagination. It's quite short, and it takes real scientists, including several quantum physicists. By the way, I have a long-standing dalliance with physics and quantum physics. And it kind of fictionalizes their worlds during their peak, call it imaginative episodes where they were about to figure out some major discovery. I'm not doing it justice because the book at its heart is really about how impossible it is to know the world. That's what physics shows us on the quantum level anyway. And some of the dangers of maybe assuming you know too much, and like the arrogance of science, and that the repercussions of discovering, say, how the world works leads to things like chemical warfare in World War I. and nuclear bombs. And so it's quite a mess, but it's a beautiful, beautiful book. I couldn't recommend it more highly. And it kind of fits into the investing paradigm because quantum physics is about probabilities rather than cause and effect. And, as poker players and investors, we know the value of when you see the world probabilistically
For sure.
and linearly.
I definitely feel like I've got Schrodinger's portfolio at the moment, where every time I open the box at like 9:30 a.m. US time, who knows whether it's going to be green or red. My portfolio is both alive and dead at the same time.
You're in better shape than mine's pretty much dead every time. I'm pretty sure there is nothing alive in there any longer. And by the way, Schrodinger was one of the main characters. There's a chapter devoted to him.
I'd love to put it on my reading list, but my reading list is so long, and I just spend so little time actually reading. I spend all my time like glued, well, if I'm trying to keep my head out of TikTok, but glued to actual news sources. Like the world, there's so much shit happening in the world right now. I don't find the bandwidth to read for pleasure or even for education.
Right, you're one of these millennial whippersnappers, huh? You have no time for books no more, Luke? Huh? Just you and your thumbs. How big are your thumbs? Are they gorilla size yet?
Do you want to hear something extremely dumb? This was about 2 months ago when I was with my buddy Tom, and someone gave me a business card, and I was I'll admit, I was pretty drunk at the time, and I was squinting to read the business card, and I tried to like pinch to scroll it and zoom in. I was like, what am I doing?
That's such a great point, though. Can you really imagine what it's like, if you're, say, 2 or 3 years old and all your life your parents gave you the devices? I mean, the way you understand the world, talk about when we cease to understand the world, is so cognitively different from, our generation. But anyhow, it seems like you're a lost cause. So you ready for 3 questions?
Oh, wow, gosh, yeah. 3 conversations game. It's your turn to ask me. Let's just quickly remind anyone who hasn't listened to a prior episode. So we usually wrap up each episode with 3 conversations game. This week, Krzysztof is going to pitch 3 conversations that I have no idea about what he's going to ask me. I'm going to get to cancel one of them that I really don't want to talk about. And then he's going to pick one of the remaining 2. And I have to give him a minute of well-reasoned discussion on the chosen topic.
All right, excellent. So Luke, first one is kind of a softball question.
I like it.
Your life depends on making the correct investment in sort of absolute dollar terms.
Okay.
And we're talking about the investment period starts today and ends 5 years from today. And you have to bet your life on either Elon and Twitter or Zuckerberg and Facebook.
Right.
Which of those will bring in quantitatively a better return on capital?
Right. Okay.
Question 2. What's harder? Laying down a great poker hand with a huge pot when you see a nasty river card show up, or selling a stock with tremendous tech potential, but that's down like 97% and is in that worry bucket?
Okay. Yeah.
What's harder? And the third question, who will win the World Cup and why will that team be Poland?
I've got to put a line through the World Cup just because literally I have no idea about football. I'm a fan of Poland. I've been to Krakow many times, and I wish you all the luck in the World Cup, but I have no vested interest in the outcome, particularly based on where it's at. But I didn't like previous World Cups either.
Okay, wow, that really surprises me. Learn something new every day. But you seem like made for football. Okay,
I was too focused on chatting up the goals when I was a youth. I let my competitors watch the football matches.
Okay. I see. That's a smart playbook. No wonder you're okay. I see what you've done there. Tell me about what's harder: laying down the poker hand, or selling that investment that just won't leave you alone.
Yeah. Okay. And I think when I was at my poker prime, I think one of the strongest parts of my game was the ability to make a big fold, which I guess is what you're describing there. You know, you've huge amount of money in the middle. Maybe it's not a huge amount more, but you sense that your opponent's stronger and they're trying to just sort of squeeze that last bit of cash out of you. It's kind of folding in those situations. I've actually folded kings pre-flop correctly once in Las Vegas to create a claim. And from the crowd, one my buddy I was with just shrugged his shoulders and called me an idiot, even though I was correct on that occasion. So I used to make great folds. I will say my game is terrible now because I play with a bit too much alcohol in me, and I've lost the ability to make those great folds. I just want to see my curiosity gets better at me. So that's a massive part of my game I need to tighten up. So that is hard, and I'm finding that very hard now. But I will say, selling a beaten down stock is potentially harder. And I'll reference back to that conversation we had earlier about no regrets. Like I talked a big game there and said, no regrets decision. I've just sold Fiverr, and I'm not going to look at Fiverr. But if Fiverr does do 100x, like 20 people are going to come and tell me, right? So there's no getting away from that information. And I am going to feel like a donkey because I lost like a ton of cash on, a fair bit of cash on Fiverr. And if I could have ridden that back up to, glory days, then fantastic. And I'll try and remind myself of my rationale for selling, which was well thought out. But I think in the long run, if a company I sold succeeds, that will prove to be the harder thing to keep in my cool and my calm. When I know I've then, even though I made what I thought was the right decision, it's turned around and bitten me. And I suppose another aspect of all of those two things is, like, if you're making that fold in poker, like, the only thing you can lose is the money on the table. It's no longer your money anyway. It's now the pot's money. If you've artfully chosen those two things because it's very, very similar. But if you sell that beaten down stock, the amount of money you could lose, inverted commas, is theoretically infinite if that company does like 1,000x. So, the potential loss on paper is much greater with the stock than with the poker hand.
Wow, what an answer! I'll push back just in one way, because there's the step beyond laying down a great hand with a huge pot, and that's when you lay it down only to see that your opponent was bluffing you. Because that takes away your dignity. You're left with nothing at that point. You're left. You have no money. Oh my God, the pain! I think I'd rather lose 5,000% in a stock than have that kind of loss at the poker table. Yeah.
If not really an anecdote, but a bit of sort of insider kind of. If you play a lot of poker, then you might introduce something called the 7 deuce game. Are you familiar with that? So if you're playing regular sort of Texas Hold'em, which is the most popular game, like me and my buddies play all sorts of different games, but in regular Texas Hold'em, like objectively, the very worst hand you could have is a 7 and a 2 of different suits. So anyway, we play the 7 deuce game, which I know a lot of high stakes folk do as well. We're not high stakes players, but we do this too. If you raise with the worst hand, if you raise with 7 deuce and you subsequently win the pot, however you win it, by bluffing or just by getting there, flopping quad sevens, who knows? If you've raised pre-flop with the worst hand and you win, everybody around the table has to give you some money. Like I think we did it for like $5 or $10. So because of that, there were 1 or 2 characters in our game who would go mental with 7 deuce just because they wanted the glory of showing the bluff when they won a big pot. That was a fantastic addition to the game. For players like myself who probably didn't quite have the cojones to make the big play with the 7 deuce, we would make significant equity from these crazy plays that would result as a consequence of people going wild with that bad hand.
And you see, folks, this is why No Limit with Luke and Krzysztof is now your favorite podcast.
Are you the 7 deuce in this, Krzysztof? You're a pair of aces, my friend. You're a pair of aces.
All right. I think that, that wraps us up, right?
For another 2 weeks, yep. Today was Monday the 21st of November. I guess this is going out just at the start of December.
Okay, right on. Luke, always a pleasure. can't wait to see you soon for and hear your next pitch for seven investing.
Bless you too. I'm pitching mine in about 2 hours' time, and I know you love this company. I've got an interesting take on it.
Oh, can't wait.
Thanks, everybody. See you in a fortnight.